So what I found during that period of time was that when I had a drink, my anxieties, my panic immediately went away. It was like my best friend telling me, "That's crazy. You don't have this, or you're not this. Everything's fine." And it was just this calming, complete serenity that overtook me at that time. And that lasted me for a while. That it was a complete solution. It was okay, and it was fully without consequence. And so I proceeded, and before I knew it, it just became a daily, a nightly habit, which over time developed into your typical alcoholic symptoms of, well, now I'm hiding it from people. Now I'm creating these rules for myself. I'm not going to drink after 5 o'clock. I'm not going to drink on a weekday. I'm not going to drink here. It's almost like you're kind of an alcoholic gremlin. You don't want to get wet. But over time, it developed into that, and over time, I would gradually break every single one of those rules.
That was Adam Hill, and you are listening to episode 123 of the Yogi Triathlete podcast. Welcome back, you guys. Here we are again at that place where we share stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose. This pursuit of purpose trickles down from the top as BJ and I are beyond doubt that we have found ours through Yogi Triathlete and her mission to create a better world. This podcast is one of the main ways that we increase connection in the world, and so thank you so much for tuning in. If you're finding that the show is assisting you in making a difference in your life, please become a member of our Patreon community. This is a huge piece of what allows us to continue. We're currently at 18% of our goal, and we are incredibly grateful to all who have stepped up and voiced to us that the show must go on. And so it does. And I'm fired up to share with you our guest today. A bit of a warrior and a little awkward, but otherwise normal, Adam Hill was cruising through life like the best of us. But what he didn't know was that those worries that so many of us see as normal were festering into something much more powerful under the surface. His first full-blown anxiety attack came in college. A quote-unquote out of the blue, irrational fear showed up in his mind and quickly took position in his life as reality. The remnants of this attack, he says, lasted a few weeks. Thinking that he had gotten to the other side by feeding his intellect with evidence to the contrary, he rested easy, but not for long. The anxiety grew, and intense fear overtook him time and again without signs of surrender until he noticed his anxiety waving the white flag in the presence of alcohol. As his social drinking increased, his temporary relief from anxiety followed. Alcohol brought him serenity. Drinking was his solution to anxiety, and he believed it to be fully beyond consequence. He managed his drinking with very common rules like only drinking on the weekends and never drinking and driving. He was a professional. He was married. He was a dad. He was fully functioning and using alcohol as his consequence-free solution. Over time, like everyone who falls prey to a dependency, he broke all of his rules. He was getting messy with his management, and on a fate-filled morning, which simply started out with a desire to surf, Adam found himself in jail with many consequences to face. Adam's story is one of resiliency and transformation through triathlon and fitness. He went from an overweight, non-athletic, fearful drunk to one of the top age group triathletes in the world. He believes now that anxiety is a superpower and that the way to the other side of fear is by facing it head on. I am honored to share with you our convo with the heavily up-leveled version of a man who met his rock bottom and then rose to the pinnacle of his sport, Adam Hill. All of our potentials are amazing, especially our guest today.
Can we test it out?
Yeah, I tested it out. We're good to go, man. All right. We're rolling now into this combo. All right, Adam, thank you so much for coming down from San Clemente. We're basically neighbors.
Yeah, it is absolutely my pleasure.
There's just like a marine base between us and you.
Yeah, it's full protection.
Yeah, we're fully protected from one another.
Yep.
But then when we want to come together, that's not a problem either.
That's right. Yeah, and we get the sound of freedom constantly around us.
I know, exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, well, thanks for taking a trip down here today. So we're gonna dive right in, and you're a coach, you're a triathlete, but you are also somebody. You're a human who has gone through a big transformation, and that's what I want to dive right into. And your transformation really was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was fueled by pain associated with alcohol.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, and when we talk about alcohol being that, it was just a symptom of, the deeper issues of just the obsessive personality, the anxiety, and that just became my solution to deal and to cope with that. And yeah, it was a big part of my life, big part of my story.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember the first time you had a drink?
I do. I was probably about 16 years old. I had I was with a couple of people. I'm not going to mention any names. But I was with friends, very comfortable environment, and there was beer. I had a beer, and I drank half of it, and I put it down, and I never thought of it again. That was the last experience that I can remember having a normal experience with alcohol, in terms of having that memory and thinking about how normal drinkers might have a drink. They might have half a beer and say, okay, that's enough for me. Right. I can never, ever think like that again. That's just not, after having gone into the experiences I've gone into with alcohol, I can't even picture myself ever doing that again, having half a beer and putting it down. It's just, it's my entire mindset on it has changed.
So what happened after that half a beer? You're saying that's the last time you remember just being able to do that.
That's, yeah, basically I'd gone on a couple years without touching alcohol at all. And at that time in my life, I was a teenager. I was fairly normal, didn't have any real issues. I was a bit of a worrier, but no real anxiety or anything, like any problems like that. Just a bit of a worrier, not very social necessarily, kind of awkward around mostly girls, and but I basically went on and kind of lived a normal life. Went to college, and started drinking more socially, and it was still somewhat normal in the sense that everybody around me was drinking very similarly. It was our first time of freedom, so there was nothing out of the ordinary about getting drunk on a weekend and that being a normal occurrence. And it was probably somewhere around my early 20s when I had my first serious panic anxiety attack. And it just blew me away because I didn't know what it was.
Can you describe it? Do you remember it?
I do. I was sitting in my apartment. I was alone and basically studying for probably biology or chemistry or something like that. I was simply studying, and it just came over me like a wave. It was just this immense fear and panic, and it was debilitating. It was paralyzing, and I just kind of got down on the floor. And what the topic of the fear, the panic, is really insignificant. It was just this matter of my brain latched onto something specific, and it took hold with this just immense and debilitating fear. And what the topic was is it was probably because of something I was studying, but I just came to this realization that, wow, I've got AIDS. And now I didn't have AIDS, but it's this irrational fear and this irrational anxiety, and I bring it up specifically because I just want to specify how irrational it is, and how kind of crazy it seems, because there was no reason for me to assume that. A normal person wouldn't really assume that of themselves if they didn't have a reason to be so, and I certainly didn't have a reason. I wasn't taking intravenous drugs, and I wasn't promiscuous in any way or anything like that. So, but it was just still this immense reality in my head, and it was all consuming. And so it was this panic attack. It lasted all night, and the remnants of it lasted for just the general anxiety about and the certainty of it lasted for a couple of weeks until I was able to get tested and reassure myself that everything was okay. And
but isn't that so interesting how the mind works? Like, if I get tested and I find out that I don't have it, which you already knew you didn't, then everything will be okay.
Right.
But it wasn't, because that test, that result of that test did not heal the anxiety that was still brewing under the surface.
Exactly. Yeah. And the next week it became cancer, and the next week it became the police are after me for something, and it was always irrational. Something and I didn't, and the thing is, I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was crazy, so I couldn't talk to anybody about it because in my mind, I can't tell people that, they would just think I'm crazy. And but when I got older and when I realized that I had a generalized anxiety disorder, that I realized that millions of Americans have the same problem and have this disorder, and I wasn't alone. I wasn't unique in this way. It's just when it manifested itself at that time, and it happened to manifest itself at a time that I was getting into, some extreme social drinking. So what I found during that period of time was that when I had a drink, my anxieties, my panic immediately went away. It was like my best friend telling me, "That's crazy. You don't have this, or you're not this. Everything's fine." And it was just this calming, complete serenity that overtook me at that time. And that lasted me for a while. That it was a complete solution. It was okay, and it was fully without consequence. And so I proceeded, and before I knew it, it just became a daily, a nightly habit, which over time developed into your typical alcoholic symptoms of, well, now I'm hiding it from people. Now I'm creating these rules for myself. I'm not going to drink after 5 o'clock. I'm not going to drink on a weekday. I'm not going to drink here. It's almost like you're kind of an alcoholic gremlin. You don't want to get wet. But over time, it developed into that, and over time, I would gradually break every single one of those rules, and that's kind of how it manifests itself, where it's this complete and perfect solution until it's not anymore, and now it's just creating more problems than it solved.
Oh, it absolutely just blows everything up.
Mm-hmm. And nobody around you saw the momentum, the picking up of the quantity and the time, like you were starting to have it more and more. Nobody saw that.
Well, my wife did, and certainly, I mean, when I was younger, my friends had experienced it, but in such a way, I was like, dude, you were a little crazy last night, so chill it out. But my wife experienced this with me from the very beginning, and she stuck with me and stayed with me, and to her great credit, and she's a wonderful and beautiful woman for doing that. But for what I put her through, it was very, very. It's something that it's always obviously very hard for me to live with and everything. But trying to make that up to her, obviously over time.
But she loves you that's unconditional love. She loves you without condition.
Yeah, she's an amazing support,
and if she loves you without condition, which clearly she does. She doesn't need you to make up for anything.
Right.
I'm sure she would be the first. I don't know your wife. I've never met her, but I just feel like she would be the first one to say, like, you getting to where you are today is everything that she could ever want for you. Because she just wants it to see it for you, for you to experience the joy in life that is your right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's our story. It's not just my story with this. It's our story and our struggle, and it doesn't just involve me because it was us living together, with it, and so she saw that frequently, and she would always, and on occasion, she would bring up the idea, you need to, go get help and things like that, and I would for a while, and then, but it wouldn't be because I was deliberately making that choice. I still had this anxiety that I didn't know what it was and how to work with it. It wasn't until I was really ready, and that's one of the key points about alcoholism or any kind of obsession that you have that is dangerous or debilitating. Because really, again, alcohol is just a symptom. If it's gambling, if it's sexual addiction, if it's any kind of addiction, it's an obsession that is part of a bigger set of symptoms that exist that need to be resolved, and that's what needed to happen with me. And so over time she lived with that too, and she had to deal with a lot of that.
So what was your rock bottom? Because obviously you had something happen that woke you up. Was it one event, or was it over time? Were you having those conversations with yourself of like, I don't want to do this anymore, but you just were still doing it?
Right. Well, yeah. When you start to create rules for yourself.
Oh, yeah, those are red flags.
Yeah, you're starting to realize something's up, and that's where we were talking about ego a little bit earlier, but that's where the ego comes in, is because you're trying to convince yourself that you don't have a problem, and so the ego's a big part of it.
Our yoga teacher calls the ego the little bastard,
Yeah.
little bastard, and he always like makes like when he teaches about the ego. It's always about you, but it's a little bastard, but it's not one that you beat away.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get mad at it because that's the ego too.
Mm-hmm.
To get mad at the ego is the ego coming in the back door.
Right.
So it's like, it's just seeing it for what it is. And the ego is this force of energy that we are all susceptible to because we live as humans on this earth, and it will do anything to keep you in dissatisfaction, in conflict, in strife in your life, because it needs to keep you separate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It needs to keep you separate. It needs to keep you either the victim, the victimizer, your family, my family. Separation is its lifeline. And so it needs to be seen it needs you to see yourself as a separate, autonomous being. I've got a problem with alcohol. It's my problem. Nobody, right? Like you were feeling the isolation at the beginning until you realize that, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not alone. And the moment you realize you're not alone, the ego's like, oh boy. So it will muscle up to counteract the fact that you're starting to wake up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll even have more resistance.
Right. Yeah. And it was just this convincing of myself that no, alcohol is the only solution that I have for myself, that I can stay functional in this way. And I convinced myself that I was functional because I was still going to work. I was still, a father. I still had a wife, even though I had the most amazing woman with me at the time, and patient and everything. That was, it was still convincing me, that was one way of convincing myself of some kind of normalcy. But, and speaking of these rules that I created for myself, not drinking before 5 p.m., not drinking on the weekdays. One of those big ones that I never broke was drinking and driving. I never broke that rule. And that was one of the things that convinced me that I was okay until one day I did. And at some point after that, I was in an accident while drunk, and I was arrested. And was sitting in jail, the fog kind of clearing from my head, and just realizing that I had no solution. That it just wasn't working, and now it was a danger to other people, and it broke me down completely. I mean, it's just this imagination that you've kind of got everything under control, and then it all breaking apart and realizing that I have absolutely no control, not over my life, not over other people's lives, and affecting this. And I just thought there in the jail of how I just wanted to die, and I didn't want to commit suicide. I just wanted to be taken. I wanted my life to be taken at that point. And I realized that if I have to remain on this earth, and I have to manage my life and learn a new way to live with my anxiety and kick the alcohol, I needed to get help. And so I did. I went into Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's how I began to recover from alcohol. And when I went in there with complete willingness, and it's not just AA, and I'm not promoting any kind of recovery because there are many different kinds, but giving myself willingly to some kind of program of sobriety where I could give up that control and realize that there was a higher power, that something bigger than myself, something bigger than alcohol that I could depend upon to help me through this. That was where I began to get my serenity back and began to feel the serenity that I first felt when I had that first drink. And, I felt that serenity. That was an amazing revelation. That's, a higher power would help me through this. I had to have a higher power because alcohol became my higher power.
Oh yeah, and alcohol is going to keep you from that true higher power, which is within you.
Right.
It just dumbs it down, it clouds it out. And because you are loved unconditionally by that higher power, you were put in that accident. You were arrested. You were given that opportunity to say, oh my God, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. There's got to be another way. And that's what in the willingness, like you said, willingness is everything. You have to be willing, because if you're not willing, the change is not going to be sustainable. And you experience that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I love the opportunity, right? So you asked what was his low point, but it's actually like your biggest, not happiest, but it's like
it's kind of one of the best things that ever happened to you.
Yeah, the best thing. Like this is such an opportunity. So that day you drove home, like, so you promised yourself you never would do that. So what was it on that day? Was there something on that day that was like, I just got to get home and get in the car? And like, was there any sort of higher power putting you in that car in that instance? Because it sounds like you didn't do it up until this point.
Yeah, it just, and it demonstrates how bad it got for me, because this happened in the morning, and I went out surfing. I like to just have a couple beers before I would go out surfing, and honestly, I mean, my history with alcohol involves blackouts, and that's where my mind was the whole time, was blacked out. So going back to that control issue, I don't even know how or why I got in the car to drive home, and how I'd got to that level.
So it was more than a couple beers.
Yes, it was.
How many beers do you think you had that day? Do you remember?
I don't know. I don't know if it was just beer or either. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was probably a bit more than that. Yeah, it was. But it put me to the point where I was above a 0.2. And that's well above the legal limit.
It's so interesting. Like it took you out of awareness because you had your blackout. It like dove in, said, we got to wipe you out, and then we're going to put you in this cell.
Yeah.
And now you have a chance to wake up and detoxify, and then now you have the opportunity to choose, Adam.
Right.
Like you have the opportunity to choose what your next step is. Mm-hmm. But I think it had to black you out in that instance. Yeah. Otherwise,
right. Yeah, like that higher power was like, okay,
I'm only I'm only at 0.7, you know, like, or whatever
we got to get this dude to safety,
right.
Which is what happened. You got to safety.
I did, yeah.
And then you chose to keep walking towards that.
Yeah.
You kept walking towards that safety in your life. So you say something in your Quest for Kona video, and we'll put a link to this in the show notes for the show, but you say, like, there's so much more to a transformation than a before and after picture. Mm-hmm. Because you look like two totally different people.
Right.
You really do. You still look like a triathlete now, of course.
I feel like a different person.
Yeah, you are a different person. So were you just filled with the will to change, or was it rocky? Like, did it get sticky and mucky? And, like, did you ever want to walk away and say, I can't do this anymore, it's too much? Because I think there's like this idea that, oh, they got sober. Oh my God, so great. They got sober. They're, oh, we had an intervention. It's like, wait a minute. We're walking into the lion's den now, mm-hmm. because they've been keeping themselves away from everything that they need to heal. Mm-hmm. And so now here you are sober and all your stuff is showing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And typically people don't get sober in the best times of their lives.
Right.
And so for me, I was facing a ton of legal issues. I was facing jail time. I was facing, a lot of different things that I never thought I'd ever have to face. And that's, again, where the program of sobriety came in for me, where I was working a program and working with a fellowship of people that were sharing similar circumstances or had been through what I've been through. And I latched on to people with 25 years, 30 years of sobriety so that I could make sure that I stayed, that I stayed sober from every single day. And it wasn't easy, but in sobriety they talk about this pink cloud that kind of comes over you when you have that, those first few days, weeks, months of sobriety. And I certainly experienced that, where it was just like, where it was this overwhelming joy and peace and motivation to stay and keep doing work in the program, and that everything else, all of the potential obstacles that I was facing, that's all just, that's everything else. I'm not worried about that. Sobriety is number one. And but it's kind of once that complacency sets in and all that goes down, where it does become challenging.
It gets real.
Yeah. So for that first year, once I got through all of the legal stuff, once I got through all of that, and it became clear that everything was, the heat was off. That's where it kind of gets the most dangerous again to relapse and all that. So I made sure, and I stayed in the program because I still had this motivation to do so. But I realized that after about a year of sobriety, that I realized, this is the first time in my since I've been 18 years old, that I've been sober for anything longer than a month, let alone a year. And so that's amazing. It's something I never thought that I'd be able to do. So what else what can I do now that I never thought that I could do, that I can keep this motivation going, because I saw that, I didn't want to get to a place where I'm just kind of spinning wheels and just doing this thing. I wanted to test myself and make sure that I can continue to improve upon who I was. And that involved getting healthier, generally speaking, changing my diet, my lifestyle. I was living off of peanut M&Ms and Reese's peanut butter cups for that time before that and all that, and that's
rough.
Yeah, nachos and all that good stuff. I was I was overflowing over my belt. It was pretty nasty, but I wanted to start making a change, and I had just had a shoulder surgery to correct an injury that I'd had just pushing too hard. I used to get these brief and powerful motivations to go out and exercise, and I would go, run as fast as I could, or do like a bunch of pull-ups and just try and test how much I could do in that one session.
And then wreck yourself.
Totally
for the next few days.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Totally.
That was my exercise routine always for in throughout history. And this is another instance of being kind of thrown into a situation where it was forcing patience and forcing me to kind of depend on that higher power, being forced into it. Because I had this shoulder surgery. I couldn't do anything for a few months, but that's exactly when I had the motivation. Hey, I want to start, getting healthy again. And so I had to do it in such a way that I eased into it. And I eased into it with my diet first, changed my diet just to eat completely clean and all of that. And exercise obviously had to take the back burner because I wasn't allowed to do anything. But in that state, I had remembered back to about a decade earlier when I was watching television, and I was watching the Ironman World Championship way in the early 2000s or something like that. And I remembered at that time that I was totally inspired by all these people that seemed normal, that seemed like everyday people that were overcoming their own specific challenges, and to cross this great finish line. And I was just totally inspired by it. But I had that inkling that everybody says, what they say when they see that, right? I mean, you've probably heard it when you tell them that you've done Ironmans. They say, I can never do something like that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's the first word.
And we always say, of course you could.
And the
Right.
next thing is, I can't swim. I could never swim.
Yep, that's
Right.
it. Yeah, it's always the swim.
Right? So enter ego.
Yeah.
Right?
Enter your
There's
story.
No way
Right?
that ego is going to let you start to discover what you're capable of. And then because you're stronger than the ego, right? You continue to follow this calling. Mm-hmm. Then the ego goes, oh, well, I can still work my way in here.
Right.
I can still make them petrified on the swim. I can throw in a panic attack. I can, give them a flat, see how they handle that, right? So it's like the ego, you got to be on high alert. That little bastard's everywhere.
Around, man.
Yeah.
He's like right at your hip. He's like right there. Like,
Always there.
It's like a shadow. It's our shadow self. That's exactly what it is. It's that shadow self.
Yeah.
So you get this hit of like remembering that. And
Right.
so how does that memory now translate to where, are you still saying like, I could never do that? Are you saying like, wait a minute?
Well, that's where the shift happened. It was, with that year of sobriety, where I never thought that I'd be able to do that. Never thought that I'd be able to stop drinking, and then I realized, what, I can do that, and I thought to myself, why couldn't I do that? Why not? And that I can't turned into why not, and so I immediately started researching Ironman and how I can, start to do something like that. Because my first instinct is, all right, I'm gonna have to get a bike and ride as hard as I can, learn to swim as hard as I can, run as hard as I can.
That's your natural
right.
thought process. I love it.
Yeah, but fortunately, I wasn't in a condition to be able to do that at that point. And so I started off by kind of sheepishly going to my wife and saying, assuming that she would say, "No way, you're crazy," and saying, I think I want to do an Ironman. And keep in mind, I have no business doing an Ironman at this point. And she said, "Yeah, I think you should." And I was like, I think if we had like a room behind us, I would have like fallen back like 20 feet. But I was so taken aback by that and realized that I got the support, and it was like, oh crap, now I've actually got to do it.
Yes. And that's, I believe that we've had those moments before too. I mean, we're sitting in this little studio by the beach that made no sense that we should be able to rent it. Like, we're sitting in the office and we're like, we don't have jobs. We've been living out of our car for 6 months. She's like, great. When do you want to move in? Yeah. I mean, like, there's just those moments where you're like, this is not going to happen. Like, and then it just happens. Like, that was that speaking through her going, yeah, you should definitely do that.
Right. Yeah. And so it was amazing. And from right there, just having that little inkling of support, that small amount of encouragement just, led me to say, okay, yeah, let's do it full force forward. And so I started researching it, and in my initial research, it was really easy to fall upon a guy named Mark Allen, who, of course, you guys know, 6-time Ironman world champion. And I thought, all right, if I'm going to do this, I want to figure out how to do it the right way. And the reason I kind of latched on to Mark Allen, because you could have gone to Dave Scott or you could have gone to somebody else, but Mark Allen struggled in this sport for a long time until he started working with a guy named Phil Maffetone and started learning the Maffetone method. And then all of a sudden, he started winning these championships, beating Dave Scott and doing all of this. And so I was like, okay, there seems to be some kind of something there. And so I started looking into Phil Maffetone and really, really digging into that and following his diet plans, and then finding a coach who actually, I went with Mark Allen online at the time as a coach, started following the Maffetone method, started off really easy and learned the process of this easy meditative training that really started to really had amazing benefits really quickly for me, like after I was able to actually start working out. And that's where the physical transformation for me started to take place, and it was just this aha moment to recognize that that worked for me. Yeah.
Which is so different, because that's how big believers in the Maffetone method, and for those that don't know, it's basically everything. All you people that want to go hard all the time and get these really intense exercise like training sessions in, it's actually like stepping back, and like doing a pace that you can keep all day for the majority of your training. And then there's different tweaks and twists on the strategy, but this is so different from what you were doing, like the push-ups, like and the pull-ups, like going all in. Now you're switching it and just totally coming back, because this is an ego check for your training, right?
Right.
Like for most athletes, and you're a coach too, so I'm sure like you come across athletes that are like, you want me to run all week at this one like pace, and it's like, yes, this is what it is. So you gotta have that faith and belief. But I think this is the perfect time for you to dive into something like this, because this is not only is the Ironman going to challenge you, but like stepping back from that, going hard all the time is going to challenge you even more.
Right. Yeah. And and that was the beautiful thing about it. I recognize that there's so much beauty in threes, in things that have threes. Triathlon. Obviously there's 3 sports in it, but just finding that that you could find this peace, serenity, and acceptance in that. The following of the heart rate, and meeting it with your cadence and your breathing. And just finding these wonderful little tidbits in what Maffetone was teaching, and backing it off, like you're saying, it forced into me this patience and acceptance that was such a beautiful supplement to sobriety and keeping that ego in check, because I didn't have any kind of aspirations aside from the fact that I'd seen it on television and I saw it in Hawaii, but I didn't think like, I want to go to Hawaii at that point. But as soon as I kind of figured out that there was that there was this formula and that I could follow it patiently, I realized that I could keep getting better and improve upon it. And maybe one day I'd be able to kind of, reach the pinnacle of the sport in that way and find my how I could be my best. And that was important.
So what was your first Ironman that you did?
I did Cabo San Lucas in 2014.
2014. And so that race backed up to the moment that you said to your wife, I think I'm going to do an Ironman. And she said, yeah. And you're like, okay, now I got to do it. Yeah. What's that span?
That was about 13 months.
13 months.
So a little over a year.
Nice.
Yeah.
So big transformation. Yeah. Were you, at this time, were you like looking back and just saying, like, the sobriety is such a gift because it's like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were looking back and saying, like, if I can do that, I can do. Like, if I can get sober, I can totally do this.
Yeah. I mean, it was, that was kind of it. It was just this reaffirming confidence, because I lived with myself for 15, over 15 years, thinking to myself, well, I can't do this because I've failed at it so often. I can't stop drinking. And so I had such a lack of self-confidence.
Oh, and there's no power in that.
Yeah.
It's very victim.
Yeah, constant anxiety and just these overwhelming attacks of panic and realizing that I couldn't overcome that, and that was a real, so having that, being able to get sober and realizing that I had a community to help me get sober, that led me to believe that I can do anything as long as I have that support mechanism.
Yeah, the support is huge. Mm-hmm. And the support constantly reminds us that we're not alone, because we are all just trying to figure this out. So before we turned on the mics, I was telling you how I co-facilitate this online meditation and mindful living. And the other women that I facilitate it with, we always say to them, like, we're not on a pedestal. Like, we're a few train stations up, but we're all just trying to figure this out. And right. as we get more information, as we go deeper into our practice, we share that with you. And then what resonates, but we're all just trying to figure this out. And we've all got our own journeys to get where we need to go. And, Ironman is such an ultimate journey of transformation, where I think no matter where you start, if you were an athlete, like, to take it up to Ironman level is huge. So 13 months, you went from having shoulder surgery, not working out, to doing an Ironman. So how did that first Ironman go for you in Cabo?
It went really well. I didn't really know what to expect. Of course, you're always setting time.
The first one is ignorance is bliss.
Right. Based on my training numbers, I should be able to come in around 11:30.
That's right.
Like, you get there on that marathon, you're like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Nutrition.
Well, it was just such a cool experience to show up there and you when you arrive at the Ironman location, as you guys have, you just get this amazing sense. It's like Olympic Village, and you're just like around all this energy, and so I felt that. But I had these dreams of where I wanted to finish. Of course, I wanted to, by that time, based on my training numbers, I wanted to. It was, a pie in the sky goal. I really wanted to be in a slot in a close to Kona, and I ended up doing really well for first time. And I swam about a 1:10, which is about where I'm at, and biked about a 5:32 in the hilly course. And so I was happy with that. And getting on the marathon, it was brutally hot. And I remember everything was pretty. It wasn't very exciting. I mean, nothing very exciting to report until I hit mile 19 of the marathon, where I was in a porta potty for about 5 or 10 minutes. And it was just, my stomach just gave up on me, and I just went in there. And I remember getting into the porta potty and just this wave of heat. I mean, it was 90 degrees outside.
Nothing's hotter than a porta potty.
And it's like this terrible rancid humidity. And I go in there, and the sweat just immediately comes to the surface of my body, and like all of the liquid it comes out of my pores. And I just sat down, and I'm about to pass out. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So this is how I die. In a porta potty on the course of an Ironman. Somebody's going to come in here and find some gringo passed out in here, like with his pants around his ankles.
On Thursday.
Right. Yeah, on Thursday.
And they clean out the porta potty.
Yeah. Why is this thing locked? Jeez. Yeah. Oh well. But yeah, and so that was my first like thought in there, and then I finished up and got out and started running again. And
It must have felt like a cold front when you came out of that thing.
it was, yeah, but it's just this amazing feeling though. Like, yeah. I mean, it would be a feeling of 90 degrees has never felt so good coming out of a porta potty. But yeah.
It's amazing how low you can get in Ironman and how you can get out there and start running again.
Yeah.
Like that. The extremes is just amazing.
It's totally. I mean, the whole race is a journey of just ups and downs. And at that point, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I've done 100-something miles, and now I still have 10K to go. And oh my God, that's the longest 10K you're ever going to experience. And so I slogged through it, and I ended up finishing in 10:45. And I was, I mean, at that point I was hooked. I was absolutely elated and just amazed that I could get done in that time. And I was hooked. I mean, at the finish line, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I know I didn't get it now, but I think now if I keep on this path, maybe I have a chance at actually going to Kona at some point. So I'm really going to try for that. And yeah, that's where the bug really began to take me in that direction.
Because you've got the evidence now that like you're in the mix. 10:45 at your first Ironman when you know nothing, is that's pretty darn good. Yeah. So what was the next one?
Next one was Boulder, actually, and that was a little tougher because of the altitude. I did a little bit better, but I was still about the 10:36 range and everything. But yeah, the marathon killed me on that one. That's a tough marathon.
That's when they had it on? You had to go to the high school. Right?
Yeah.
There were 2 transitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you started there.
Yeah.
This is the first year they had the transition. Both transitions at the res.
Oh, they had a single
So you ran
transition.
from the res to downtown.
Wow.
But I like what you were doing better. I
Yeah.
feel like there was more activity.
Yeah.
More
It was
people.
constant. Yeah, with this crowd support and yeah, it was crowd support and shade. I mean, most of the way. So that was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the creek bed, so you could just jump in the water if you wanted to. Yeah, it's totally.
And then you were like, okay, I got to keep going.
Yeah.
So then was Santa Rosa your third?
No, Santa Rosa was the qualifying race at Santa Rosa for Quest for Kona was my 7th.
Seventh?
Yeah, so it was lucky number 7.
So between 2004, okay, so you did
About 2 a year. Yeah.
2 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what did you do?
So I did after Boulder, I did Texas and Boulder again the following year in 2015. 2016, I did Vineman when it was Vineman, and that was the first time I broke 10 hours, and so I really felt good about that. Got 6th place there, 1 slot away from a Kona slot.
Was it
Or 2
a
slots.
roll down? Oh,
yeah,
no
roll
roll
downs,
downs.
2 slots away. Yeah, so it was like I was so close there, and it was just like, gosh, that's so close. And then Arizona, same thing. I actually went under 9:30 there, and that was my next race, but I was in 7th in my age group and didn't roll at all. Then I was gonna stop for a year and just say, you know what, I'm kind of burned out on the Ironman thing. Let me do some 70.3s and have some fun. But my wife, who's got me in the trouble in the first place in this whole Ironman thing, she showed me this Facebook post about a casting call for a Quest for Kona, and I said, yeah, wouldn't it be funny if I just sent in a stupid audition video for that? And she's like, yeah, you should. And I'm like, you gotta stop saying that.
God, I love this. I love this girl.
Right.
She's the yes voice.
She is.
She's the yes voice.
She's the voice that you are not picking up on yet, but
Yeah.
she's there. She's like, yes. And Jess is the same for me. It's like, yes. I always answer yes.
Right.
Well, because
Yes.
you had created so much momentum. You were getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And when we just went through this with BJ, like he was going to do Santa Rosa this year. And then he was like, well, then I'm just going to do one. But then we're like, no, there's momentum. You got to keep this momentum.
Right.
And, he's doing more and more and more. And he's getting closer and closer and closer. And if you cut that momentum off, it takes so much to get it going again. Mm-hmm. So you kept that momentum going.
Yeah.
And you put together your video and...
Yeah, the video, the Speedo video.
That's great.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, kind of getting the family involved, and it was one of those things where you put it together not thinking it's going to go anywhere, and you just kind of throw it out there for fun. And I was kind of producing really, really stupid YouTube videos at the time anyway, for fun. And so we put that out there, and much to my surprise, I got a call back from the producer saying they wanted an interview, and we did the interview, and it was down to 20 people that they were testing, and then we did a second interview, and it was down to 11 people, and they were going to cut it down to 10, and then we were we were in, and that was the start of another life-changing experience for me. Just meeting the people on that show, every single one of them was an absolutely amazing inspiration to me. I mean, they were just, every single one of those episodes was great, and each one of the cast members has become a great friend, and they're just great individuals. So
That's so
great.
cool.
And this was under the radar. Like, you had to keep this quiet. So for those that don't know, the Quest for Kona, it's this whole process, but everything is under the radar. It's not like they're publishing like, oh, here's the 20 people that are selected, here's the 10 people, right? It's secret all the way until you got to the race, right?
Right. Yeah. So at least all of the race results and everything they wanted to keep secret. They published all of the cast members, I think, sometime in March or April or something like that. They made a big push on that, but then they were quiet. Like, everything was dark for many months after that. And so when I did Santa Rosa, it was this really surreal experience of having cameras in my face the whole time, which was, I mean, from my ego's perspective, really cool too. But it was just this kind of surreal, like, whoa, I've got to really kind of make sure I'm watching myself and make sure I'm okay.
Did that elevate your game? Did it have any, like, people talk about being on the front of the pack in Kona, like, and they get the helicopter and the cameras on, and they talk about it elevating their effort level. Did you feel 100%. That when the cameras were on? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was constantly focused on, is my form okay? Am I shutting down here? Because if I see this later and I see something that I did that I could have done better, it's just going to nag at me. So I mean, it was just this constant, like, constantly making sure that I was doing that. But really cool experience, and the crew, the cameraman, and our producer Evan Hathaway, who is just an amazing producer. They did such an amazing production. They did their best to stay away from us so that they weren't impeding on our progress and impeding on any other racers. And anyway, so we racing through that, I was just having this really great race. And when I usually don't know how my race is going until I get onto the run. I got onto the run and I felt amazing. And I got on the run with a guy that I knew, and he said, I think we're in about 4th or 5th place. And I was like, wow, that's great. And that was my first indication that, I think I got a shot here.
You had a smoking fast bike.
Yeah, it was, that was a great, such a cool bike course and such a fun bike course.
It was. Yeah, I raced it too. And it was, that second loop, the little lollipop loop, I actually liked.
Yeah.
That last little section downtown. It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
They took it away. But yeah, so you had a smoke. So you were thinking you would do like a 450. You would be super fired up. And what did you do?
I did about a 452.
So pretty spot
close,
on, right?
Yeah. So I'm pretty. I was working my bike so hard during that period of time, so I was setting these ridiculous power goals for myself, and just from mental fortitude, just making sure that I would hit them. And so it was, I think, when you mentioned having the cameras in your face the whole time, does that have an effect? And yeah, I mean, even just having to set up my own camera and do the self-filming of myself, it was just one of these things where it's like in the back of my mind, all right, this is going to be out there for people to watch. And this show is called Quest for Kona. If I don't make it there, it's, I want to make sure that I can at least give it a good shot. And so, yeah, during the race, I had I think it was probably one of the top 3 or 4 bike splits in the age group. So I was really happy with that. But getting onto the run, I felt really good. And that was it. That was the best run I've had. I ran a 3:16, and I ran into 3rd place, which secured a spot right there. And just knowing that I got 3rd place, and like hearing my wife say that as I crossed the finish line, it was just like, wow, I just couldn't believe I did it. I was out of my skin to go back to this point where, I was kind of like this worthless alcoholic that couldn't get sober or couldn't overcome anxiety or anything like that, to doing this thing that I'd set out to do and accomplishing something, the pinnacle of that sport. It was just, it blew my mind. And so yeah, it was a life-changing experience for me. It was great.
So my question is, how does one become so strong on the bike?
Yeah,
in a matter of 4 years, five or so years. Yeah.
a lot of Netflix and no.
Yes, you do a lot of trainer. You do a lot of trainer sessions.
A lot of indoor stuff. I used to ride a lot down here in Camp Pendleton and all that, and just kind of back and forth. But it's just like anything else for me. It's just a lot of trainer rides, a lot of very, very focused rides. I'll do a middle of the week mid distance workout where I'll do maybe somewhere between 40 and 60 miles, but I'll throw in some 10 or 15 minute really strong intervals in there, right above FTP. And then just try to do a lot of, I like the sweet spot intervals where I do a lot of those.
Do you use Trainer Road?
No, I use Zwift.
Zwift, okay.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's I kind of like watching
We're
Avatar.
geeking out here. Sweet spot is the sweet spot of cycling.
Right.
It's just under FTP. It's like 90-95%.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. 80%.
Yeah.
So how many miles a week do you think you're doing? I know you're on the trainer, so I don't know if you're getting miles, but or how many hours?
Probably about, when I'm peaking, probably close to 10 or 11 hours on the bike.
On the bike.
And then I'll, this year I'm a little lower just because I'm not putting in that level of focus, but.
Yeah. So in order to run a 316 off the bike, you got to be fit on the bike, right? Like you got to be, so classic scenario is too hard on the bike and then
you don't
falling
run to
apart.
your potential.
Yeah, you can't run to your potential. Yeah. So you got really fit on the bike. How are you because you also have to get fit on the run. It's not like you can just get fit on the bike and then expect to run a 315. Like you got to earn that.
Right.
So did running was that something that like came to you and you're like, whoa, I'm pretty good at this? Or did you really work your way up from that?
No, I struggled a lot on the runs in my initial Ironmans, and it was always that mile 19 just blow up. And so this time around, the first run that I did really well, I did a good run at Vineman, and I said, okay, I think I've got the formula here for myself at least, and that was really just having this really big differentiation of easy versus hard. So making easy really easy and hard really hard.
Your training.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
a big key.
It's
yeah.
huge.
But I want to hang I want to hang at my pace all day long. Like,
right.
This is the pace I have to hit.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality most people have. So and again, you're being tested. Again, it's like, can you do the thing that most athletes don't want to do?
Right. Yeah. It was one of these things where, okay, well, Maffetone, said, or based on Maffetone, my maximum heart rate is going to be 142. All right, well now I'm going to bring it down to 130 and really test myself and see if I can keep it that easy. But when I do hard, I'm going to try and target paces, and I'm going to say, all right, if I'm going to do 6 minutes at a 6:20 pace, and I'm going to try and hold that. Okay, now this week I'm going to try and do 8 minutes at a 6:20 pace, and so it's that easy stuff, that building of that easy aerobic base that gives you the energy and the power, at least, to be able to kind of push the pace on those long ones. And then if you can recover well, which recovery was a big part of what I started to do too. So
recovery is huge because that's where you adapt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with recovery, of course, it's, resting after the workout, but what else do you do for recovery?
I do, I do the Vega plant-based protein shakes right after, and that's worked really well for me. I don't do really well on dairy or anything like that, but that's what I would do right after a workout. I try to eat within an hour or so, and then I also use something called rapid release technology, which is this. It's basically a vibrating machine that I can use on my legs and everything that really helps my legs to recover and everything, and that's been really great. Normatec boots as well. I just kind of ran the gambit on all these things. Plus, never gonna leave out sleep. Sleep is probably the most important part of it. If you need to sleep 9 or 10 hours, you need to sleep 9 or 10 hours. That's just the way it is. I see a lot of people that are just wondering why they're not progressing, and they're sleeping 5 hours a night trying to get that training in. Now they need to readapt their schedule in some way to make sure that they can fit that recovery and the sleep in correctly.
I love Andy Potts. He's like, I get 13 hours of sleep a night. He gets 30. He's like, his wife knows, like,
non-negotiable.
The kid, non-negotiable. Kids, everybody stay out of the room. He's got like the blackout curtains. I mean, everything. He is so hardcore on his on his sleep, and then he's hardcore on his training. And he's somebody that trains all the time on the trainer. At least from what we've heard from a friend of his, that he trains so much on the trainer, and he's had a huge long career.
Yeah.
That guy's been amazing. So you're getting sleep, you're recovering, you're training 10, 11 hours on the bike, you're running, you're swimming. You got 2 kids and a wife, dude. Oh, and you have to make a paycheck there somewhere. Right. How are you doing all of this? What would be like in the high to Ironman training? What does a day look like?
Well, during that time, I mean, it does get really tough. I'm not going to say it's easy or anything like that. The support is the key point there, because if you don't have the support of your loved ones, to know that they're going to be missing you for a few weeks out of that hard time. At least for a portion of those days, it's not going to go well. So having that support is key, and I'm lucky to have that support. And my wife is she's a triathlete as well. She races as well, so she understands that. With the kids, it's just a lot of trying to manage all of that training into my schedule. I've put in a treadmill and a bike at my office so that I can work out there and make sure that I can take lunch breaks or something like that. So I'll take a long lunch break and I'll come in earlier so that the traffic isn't as bad. It's really just trying to find the minutes in the day that add up to enough time to be able to put this training in.
Yeah,
there.
like everything counts. So if you can come in early to avoid having to sit in the car, because sitting in the car could be a quick recovery run.
Right, yeah.
Or the time to make the shake.
Right,
like
exactly.
You really got to look at... one thing I think I heard from Rich Roll when he was talking about like his training for Ultraman was like he just looked at his day and looked at everywhere that he could get time back. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't believe how much time he was just kind of throwing away. Absolutely.
I mean, we were talking earlier about television, and I don't have cable. I think you mentioned you don't have cable, and so we avoid that distraction. And so there's certain distractions that you can look at within your time that you're taking out. And you remember that I'm an alcoholic, so I spent years spending hours drinking. I mean, and so the replacement value on that is huge. So I mean, it's easy for me to say, well, yeah, I've got all the time in the world to train, because what I'm comparing that against is somebody who was either drunk or hungover and wasn't productive at all. So now I'm able to be productive and work out on this. And I'll also add that the type of training, be it easy and all that kind of stuff, I can get work done on my bike. I can better think when I'm actually training. It improves my productivity. It's just it's a change in how we think about what training does for us, and that's what it does for me.
Yeah, and it becomes your lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our lifestyle. We've lived it for many years now.
Yeah, and everything becomes a question of, is this moving me towards my goal or moving me away from my goal? Yeah. And it's okay if it's moving you away, but if you're telling the universe you want to get to Kona and you're sitting in traffic when you could be doing something else, then you're telling the universe, I'm only dipping my toes in it. Like, maybe it'd be cool if I got there, right?
Yeah.
Like, Kona is an all-in thing, and it's a dream of many, many people. Like, it's just not you, just not me. Like, we're competing against a lot, like thousands and thousands of people who want to get there. Yeah. Even those who haven't done a triathlon yet and have the goal of, like, their first triathlon, this is it. Like, I want to get there. So...
yeah, there's more and more people every year, and then the people who go, like, I bet you want to go back, right?
Yeah, it'd be great to go back.
So now you're back in the mix, right? Like, some people just keep getting back in the mix, and then more people keep getting thrown into the stew, and that's why it gets, because when we first started racing Ironman, like, you could do like an 11:30 or something and go to Kona.
Yeah,
that is not the case.
I remember distinctly a friend of ours who went to Louisville. And he did he was qualifying, the 30 to 34 at a 10:26 or 10:30. And I was like, okay, that's pretty possible. But now the stakes are so high. I mean, everybody is like cruising, and there's more and more races to be had. So, and I don't know if they're adjusting the slots based on more races, but how does that sit with you at all? Does it sit with you, or is it just a non-factor that there's like the competition is like increasing, the times are getting faster?
Oh yeah, it was totally a factor, and it was a bit frustrating for me to kind of look at all of these races and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do Arizona this year, and of course you go back to the year before and you look at the times and you're just like, geez, some of these races now you have to break 9 hours to qualify and all that. And so, yeah, it certainly sits in my head like that. But then what I realized was that, it's not really about the times or anything like that. It's just about really just racing your race and racing the best that you can and getting back to the nature of why we're doing this, which is just to either continuously improve ourselves or just to continuously improve ourselves and prove to ourselves what's possible. I mean, I didn't think that I could do a 9:30 Ironman. And I did it. I've done it twice now. I never thought that I'd be able to do that, a few races ago. And it's just, results are just a point, just a data point in time. And, to say that, well, I can't do a 9:30 because everybody else is doing a 9:30. That's what it's going to take to qualify. Well, that's kind of getting back to the mindset of I can't do this race at all. Or going back to I can't swim or I can't do that. So it's hard. Yeah, I mean it's a challenge to race the top 0.001% qualify, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. Yeah. And they're just human and you're human, so why not? Of course you can do a 9:30.
Yeah.
Of course you can. You can do anything.
Yeah. And it's just about the work that, you're willing to put in. And I put a lot of work into that training build to get and the years coming up to it. I mean, getting back to the anxiety in a way, what I realized through this process of training for Ironman was that anxiety is, it's an issue, it's a disability. And if I could say something that may be helpful to anybody that may be struggling out there with it, it's also a superpower. It's also a way to make yourself better, because that same obsession that I had with alcohol that caused me to obsessively want to drink also caused me to obsessively focus on training, to really look at these numbers and then say, I've got to hit these numbers when I'm training, and to really dig in and do that. So it's really finding out what your superpower is and really, really harnessing that. Everybody's got that superpower. I mean, that, and I was able to just find what mine was and capitalize on it.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
I love that ending.
Perfect.
So
thank you.
How can people connect, follow you, and also what's next? We want to find out what's next.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing Ironman Wisconsin with my wife. My wife's first Ironman.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. We'll be tracking you guys.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how can they connect?
Find out what's going on. I'm at adamhilltry.com, and you can also find me on Facebook and all the socials and all that kind of stuff. So just adamhilltry.com is probably the best way to go.
Thanks, Adam.
Right on. Thank you guys.
Awesome, you guys. Thanks so much for checking in with us this week. If you are loving or even just liking the show, get over to Patreon and set yourself up for podcast exclusives like the extra we just put up detailing Coach BJ's nutrition plan for Utah's toughest. We will be back in Utah next year for the race, so if you're thinking about going extreme in 2019, let us help you get there. Team Yogi Triathlete is growing steadily, and we still have room for you. So if you want a training plan that is all-encompassing and assisting you to be your highest and best, not just in sport, but life, you guys, then get on board. We've been waiting for you. Also, get over to yogitriathlete.com and check out the blog post for this episode for ways to connect with Adam and show notes for this episode, including links to join the M21 Revolution, which is an insanely powerful community of people making huge shifts in their lives and blowing themselves away with their ability to deliberately create. It's $21 a month, and I promise you, what you get for $21 is invaluable. We are teaching how to change limiting belief systems. We are teaching meditation. We are teaching mindfulness practices that are immediately applicable to life. But most of all, we are teaching people how to live a life where the rules of the physical world no longer apply. We live in a world of limitations here on this earth, and this revolution is about leaving those limitations in the dust. So that's it, you guys. Thanks so much for showing up. And keep showing up. Show up for your goals. Show up so you can be the athlete and person you dream to be. Show up for the work, because that is what fills the space between where we are and where we want to go.